Welcome to the Lights, Camera, Action Entertainment Reviews Podcast.
The world is changed. Much that once was is lost. For none now live who remember it. History became legend. Legend became myth. And some things that should not have been forgotten were lost.
Our Lord of the Rings retrospective comes to an end.
It has now been found.
Is it secret? Is it safe?
You have my sword.
And you have my bow.
And my axe. Carry the face of us all, little one.
We're coming too!
Mr. Frodo's not going anywhere without me.
You will face evil, and you will defeat it.
On this episode, we will be discussing and reviewing The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King.
Are you frightened?
Yes.
Not nearly frightened enough.
This episode will contain spoilers. Listener discretion is advised.
There will be no dawn for men.
And now, here are your hosts for this episode. Mike Winkler, Alistair Englehart, and Daniel English. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Lights, Camera, Action Entertainment Reviews Podcast, Lord of the Rings retrospective, the final part, ladies and gents, Return of the King. And I'm back here with Alistair Englehart and Dan English as we discuss this final chapter in the beloved Lord of the Rings trilogy. How you all doing?
Good. How are you doing, Mike?
Doing good.
Excellent. Just got done watching the 4-hour Return of the King. It was a good part of my day.
Yeah. That's commitment.
Indeed. Indeed.
So I got to start off by saying Return of the King is way better this time around for me than it has been in the past.
Oh, yeah?
It was for me, too.
I'm not saying that it unseats Fellowship just because Fellowship is so underappreciated. So that's more of a political thing for me. But I enjoyed it so much. I really did.
What changed this time around?
I guess it's just been so long since I watched it that I found myself not having remembered certain things. I found myself really loving the balance, as I did in Fellowship, between levity and gravity. I thought ending at the victory of Helm's Deep was a really optimistic place to start. And I think I had this false memory of the trilogy of just increasingly bleak until the end. I don't know. Maybe my mental state last time I watched it was like less optimistic, but this time around it just was a much more optimistic film. And and certain things jumped out at me and initiated certain thoughts it was just fun. It was a good watch.
Had you seen had you seen the extended version before, or was this the first time watching the extended, Stan?
Yeah, so pretty much every time I've watched these, except for in the theater, have been extended because we got my dad the extended movies as they came out when we were younger. So I've just always had the extended versions of the movies.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's a few scenes in the extended version that I think do actually create a much more optimistic view. The three that I'm thinking of are, one, when there's the scene with Frodo and Sam that directly follows Gandalf's explanation of the decline of Gondor, where they see the halo of flowers around the fallen Gondorian king statue. And it's kind of like this brief moment of hope. And then
till it becomes overcast.
Right, till it becomes overcast. And The other scene that I think follows it later in the film is when Faramir and Denethor are heading towards the pyre. I guess when Denethor's taking his son Faramir towards the pyre, you don't get that flower in the theatrical edition that they show on the White Tree of Gondor.
Mm-hmm.
But that's another scene where they kind of, I think, cast a bit more of a hopeful, a bit more foreshadowing that it's all gonna that it's gonna resolve itself, despite how dismal the current state of things are. And then my favorite is actually when Sam and Frodo are in Mordor, and there's that one night where they're lying on the ground, tired, and suddenly Sam sees this star shining, and he tries to cheer up Frodo, and he's like, "There is light and beauty up there that no shadow can touch."
I like that line.
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. So I get, I feel like those three. I'm sure there's more, and you're probably thinking of your own scene, Stan. But I think those are three scenes that jump to mind for me with the extended edition that I think do hit the theme of hope a lot more strongly than it was even in the theatrical edition.
Mm-hmm.
So
for myself personally, I don't want to get into how I rank it within the trilogy yet until the end, but I think one of the things I really, really enjoyed about this especially was, the beginning. I liked seeing Smeagol's opening to when he killed his friend. Is that his friend or his brother? Who is that? Is that just his friend?
Yeah, Deagle. I don't know. I think it's just a friend. I don't think it's a family member.
It's a friend.
Despite the similarity in name.
Yeah,
that too was present, but it was extended with extended material.
Oh, really?
I remember. Yeah, I think I'm trying to. It's hard for me to remember. I should look this stuff up, but it's hard for me to remember how much of it was extended. But one of my anticipations for the extended edition in Return of the King was getting more of Smeagol's backstory.
Which I thought was very important too, because some of my favorite scenes are actually the scenes with Frodo, Sam, and Smeagol, because Smeagol trying to get Frodo to turn on Sam was I think I almost had a little problem with the fact that Frodo was so easily persuaded by Gollum to tell Sam to go home. I thought, Sam so well, and you're going to tell him to go home when you've only known Gollum for this brief amount of time that he allowed him to kind of consume his thoughts and push Sam to the side.
Yeah.
I mean,
you know why it's a problem, Mike, is because it didn't happen in the book, because that's not who Frodo is.
Now, how did it go in the book?
He never cast Sam away. And I think that gets back to what we talked about a little bit with the Two Towers, of the introductions of conflict or moral conflict, or just I think blemishes to certain characters that for whatever reason I think the scriptwriters seem to think would appeal to the audience more.
So I like that part.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning you liked that part.
And the reason I like that part is because it's just such an emotional time. And I don't want to be sensationalist, but that's when Sam's devotion comes to a head. That's when
that's true.
He could go home, he could retire, he could die, but he chooses to follow them and try to keep after them despite having been cast out. And I also think that, again, this is as I haven't read 2 or 3, so not a book reader here. The bonding that happens between Frodo and Smeagol, because they both bear the burden of the ring, is something that I like and I find very believable. Because Frodo is not Frodo is about to get to Mordor by the end of this and choose not to get rid of the ring. And so Frodo's path is from the two fractured elements of Smeagol's personality. He starts off quite endurant and self-sacrificial and relatively, you know, not really affected by the ring's temptation, offering it to people unwittingly, not understanding that, you know, the power it can hold over people, to the point where by the end, you know, in Fellowship, he's offering it to Gandalf, he's offering it to Galadriel, he's taking it just so people don't argue over it. And now Sam says he could carry it for a moment, and that seed that Gollum had planted into his head, just you know, he's a different person.
I like that. That's that's good.
I don't love tarnishing characters who otherwise have as part of their core attributes to be noble, like Faramir. It's actually kind of disappointing to me that Faramir was such a mean character, and that the Knights of Gondor weren't actually representatives of humanity's last hope. They were just a bunch of thugs. But I do think it's consistent with Frodo's arc to have him push Sam away like that. And Sean Astin just does such a good job in that scene.
His performance in this movie definitely blows the other two out of the water. It's just his performance is so commanding, and just the tears in his eyes in those scenes just feel so real. His friendship with Frodo, it feels so meaningful. It's like they're these close brothers that have been bonded since they were born. It almost feels like that they just have such a close bond with each other. Yeah. And that's why it's so sad at the end. Yeah, that's why it's so sad at the end when Frodo goes away. Just it's like Sam really is losing a brother.
Yeah, that is. I definitely, the first time I watched it, I don't remember why I had forgotten, but I wasn't expecting Frodo to leave, and it was a very sad scene. The emotion of the ending wasn't lost to me there.
That's my question to you guys too. I didn't really remember the ending from the first time I saw it, and at first I perceived the ending is after Sam and Frodo are on the volcano, and they pass out thinking they're going to die there, and then the screen fades to black, and then we come back with the eagles picking them up. It almost felt like, especially with the color palette in the movie for how bright it was, it almost made it feel like they died in that moment and everything else was a dream in their head after the fact. I know it wasn't, but it almost appeared that way with the color palette that Peter Jackson was using there. That's the filmmaker in me coming out there, just seeing it that way.
Like how it fades to black, or like complete black.
Yeah, like the movie could have ended right there.
Yeah, it does. I remember it does seem like an ending, especially if you're watching it for the first time. It's like, wow.
Well, that's ending number one.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you were right too, by the way, Dan. I picked up on that. I was watching how many times it seemed like the movie could just have ended. Like 3 or 4 times at least.
I mean, I get so absorbed in the Battle of Minas Tirith that when that one ends, Theoden dies, Merry and Pippin are reunited. I'm like, okay, this is good. Like, this is over, right? And then Gandalf mentions how many orcs are between Sam and Frodo and Mordor, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. This whole ring.
There are long periods of time in this movie where we don't see Frodo and Sam at all, especially in the extended. I couldn't believe, there were a lot of characters too that I noticed that didn't have as much screen time as the previous movies. Like Legolas barely did. Trying to think who else didn't. But yeah, Frodo and Sam didn't have a lot of screen time to the last act of the movie. I mean, they were pretty much absent the first, I don't know, hour and a half, maybe just a few scenes here and there. But I was shocked by that. I didn't realize that the spacing of characters in this film was so wide.
I think part of it too is they just added so much. Because what'd you say, Al? 50 minutes of extra footage.
That's a lot.
And so, yeah, I mean, if you're adding extra scenes for the sake of getting in extra content, and I don't necessarily have a good eye for this, but I guarantee that's going to affect pacing and maybe even portioning in terms of story. So one of the things that stuck out to me this time around that I guess has been present in the whole trilogy, but really becomes at the front of my mind is Gandalf speaking authoritatively.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, he makes these assertions and declarations, and they just come to pass. And I think the most blatant one is when he tells Saruman
Your
that his
staff
staff
is
is broken. Yeah, exactly. And it breaks. And so I'm wondering, that could be just a really cool comeback, or Gandalf's magic could be that his proclamations have a creative power.
Yeah,
and he does it again. I mean, the first time we see him do it, I think this is the first time, is when he tells the Balrog that he shall not pass. He cannot pass. And what happens? The bridge collapses. He doesn't pass.
Right.
But then I think when he's exorcising Saruman out of Theoden, maybe.
Yes.
But then again, he does it when he's telling Faramir that his father will realize he loves him before the end. And that one isn't even like a spell. It's just a prophecy. And it comes true, right? Because right before he runs off the tip of the tower, the garden, he's like, my boy, Faramir, or whatever. And so I was just really intrigued at Gandalf's wisdom and power in this movie. And of course, he comforts. Oh my gosh, I mixed the
Pippin.
Drawing a blank.
Pippin.
Pippin.
Peregrine.
Pippin.
Yeah, Pippin.
White Shores.
You know, it's funny you bring up Pippin, because I really do feel like he steals this movie.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that, Mike?
Well, I think every scene that Pippin is in, I just think some of the best scenes in the movie are from Pippin, and his relationship with Merry too. When Pippin has to leave after he touches what do they call that big glowing
the
ball?
Dementia stone.
Okay, when he touches that,
Palantir.
The Palantir.
Yeah. When he touches that, and then Gandalf has to take him away. That was really the first time that I really got the sense that those two were just the greatest of friends. And it really is kind of interesting in this film how, you know, we have two sets of friendships that are so strong, you know, between, you know, Sam and Frodo and Merry and Pippin. But I don't know, Pippin, just between him bowing to
Denethor.
Yeah, when he's bowing, saying, you know, my services are yours. Let me repay the debt to your son's death, and then him being afraid to fight and talking to Gandalf and saying, you know, am I going to have to fight? Well, yes, you're in his service now, so you're going to do whatever they ask of you. And then going to Merry and seeing how committed he is that I want to fight, and going to the king and saying I want to fight. Will you let me fight?
Yeah.
And then when he shut down, saying, you know, you need to stay here. I can't let you be somebody else's responsibility. And Arwen taking him on her horse and just going. It's just little scenes like that. But Pippin does steal the movie, and I love the song he sings too. So
I like that.
It's a win-win.
Yeah, I really love what Tolkien does with Pippin and Merry. I think they certainly Sam changes a lot too, but I feel like Sam changes in the sense that he becomes more courageous and confident, whereas Merry and Pippin, to me, really, it's kind of a coming of age kind of transition for them, where they're just very, very immature when we first meet them. I mean, they're stealing fireworks. And then
vegetables.
And then vegetables, and by the end, there's just definitely a distinct nobility about them. And actually, in the books, one of the other changes, Saruman and Grima don't die quite so early in the book. Actually, they outlive Sauron and end up taking over the Shire. And so when they return from Mordor, they find all their friends enslaved. basically.
That's another hour and a half.
I know, and
Yeah.
I think that's why they had to kind of close it out early. But Pippin and Merry were kind of two of the main
battle hardened soldiers, veterans.
They kind of led the charge against Saruman and Grima at that point. So I really,
Man,
I
we
agree
have
with you,
touched so many things that I wanted to talk about. The first
Mike.
is kind of what, when you're talking about Gandalf telling Pippin, you know, you've got to do this. You swore yourself to him. It's that continued theme that I love so much in Lord of the Rings, of the idea of being duty bound, the idea that what you say matters, and what you say you'll do is a bond in and of itself.
Very much
and
so.
And people just acknowledge that. And so I found that to be a continued theme that I really enjoyed, of just characters, you know, I mean, the whole means by which we get the traitor army, the skeleton army, to come back and fight is the fact that they're duty bound, and that as a Isildur's heir, he has the ability to simply consider their debt honored. I mean, he has the choice at the end of the Battle of Minas Tirith to release them or not, and he chooses to release them. And so I love that theme, and every time it pops up, I enjoy that in this universe, what you say matters, and there's power behind promise, in a sense. I really enjoyed that.
I like how Gimli tells Aragorn too, like, you know, we can use them. They're a good asset to have. You shouldn't relieve them of their debt. Aragorn doesn't even consider it. He just like, shut up, Stuart. Just shut up.
Yeah, that's a great point, Dan. Yeah.
So then the second thing was, it's kind of like a little behind the scenes fan theory. I don't think it's in the book, but I found it really enjoyable, is that in the scene where Pippin is singing to Denethor, and Denethor's eating this feast, people are saying that it's an Easter egg if you were to pretend that Middle Earth is kind of like actual Earth. I think it was, I should look the date up again just to make sure. Yeah, in the 1500s, apparently tomatoes came as a foreign crop into Europe. And they started the acidity of tomatoes would leach lead from pewter plates and cups into the food that Europeans were consuming. So there was this spike of lead poisoning and sickness. And so when Denethor is eating at the table, there's the one shot, and I mean, you see him bite into that great tomato, but there's the one shot where he's got a pewter plate
disgusting,
just full of tomatoes. And so the fan theory is that he's becoming so insane in part because he's just eating lead all day.
Wow. Interesting.
Makes sense. It actually makes a lot of sense. I kind of got that feeling from the, you know.
Well, I mean, because he clearly is driven insane. I like the more traditional perspective that he's just, you know, power hungry. He's steward of the throne, but he doesn't intend to ever see that power back, and he's just seeing his line give up Denethor's glory for the sake of mankind as a larger whole, and I think he has a lot of trouble accepting that.
So that's cool. I don't remember from the books at all if what that scene looked like, but one of the things that I do remember that was so impactful to his dementia was that he also had a Palantir. And so he was able to see.
Is that in the movie at all?
No, it's not really. Well, so he alludes to it. He says, "I've seen more than you know."
Who's he say that to? I don't remember.
I feel like it was either Gandalf or maybe to Faramir. It's in his throne room. But I think it's Gandalf when Gandalf is just chastising him. So he sees exactly what Sauron, who also has a Palantir, wants him to see. And so he kind of sees the force that Sauron is accumulating, or at least, again, what Sauron is leading him to believe that he has accumulated on the other side of Mordor's walls, and sees what he believes to be his coming death, his coming defeat, and that's part of what drives him mad, is knowing what's coming and feeling unable to do anything about it. And that's also what leads him to be so harsh towards Faramir when he finds out that the ring was within his grasp and he didn't bring it to him, because that was the one chance in his mind that they had to actually defeat Sauron.
To hide it in a deep, dark place,
right.
only to be used in the hour of utmost need.
Or immediately.
So here's another thing then. I thought it was really cool, that scene specifically. And I'm trying to get more into the cinematographic talks, Mike, just for you. I thought it was really cool that Éowyn and Merry had just finished joining in to this chant from the Rohirrim. The Erlingus are saying, for the end of the world, for death, death, and this idea, kind of similarly to the way they were looking at the prospect of Helm's Deep, is, then we'll die. Then I will die as one of them. And so there's this repeated honor in death, striving for an unattainable righteousness or goodness. And so they're fighting against these dark forces, and it's better to fight them and meet them in battle and succumb to certain death than it is to give up in some other way or be corrupted. And so I found that really compelling to be paired against Denethor's accepting of death in this cowardly, selfish way. He wasn't dying on the battle fighting against the evil. He was dying simply to run from it or to give into it, and even taking people with him. And so I thought that was a really cool comparison, because both portrayals were people openly accepting death, and of course Gandalf is going to say it's a path we all must take, but you kind of get the sense in this section that it's a path we all take, but the means by which we get there has great effect on us and any valuation of us. So I really thought that was another pairing, because it reminded me of like Leonidas's wife when she gives the shield to her son. She tells him, come back with it or upon it. And it's this idea that victory is priority number one and death is two, right above losing. And so, win or die trying, really.
That's good.
It's funny you bring up cinematography. I'll stay on that same thing, but I did notice that a lot of the green screen effects in this movie are starting to look dated. Very much so. I'm watching closely some of the battles. I'm watching some of the scenes when they're just riding on the horse or whatnot. And I mean, to be fair, the movie's from 2003.
I think so.
I mean, to be fair, it's going to look somewhat dated, but in spots it was fairly noticeable. But I mean, I'm not going to penalize it or knock it for that, because for the times it was fantastic.
Sure.
What's funny is I agree completely. I've always felt that way about, particularly, and Al, you're going to have to give me a better name for this skeleton army. Who are these traitors? What do I call them?
I call them the Green Ghosts.
I forget, there's let me see.
But anyway, I thought that the effect surrounding these guys, I've always thought was dated more quickly than the rest of the effects.
Those didn't look so good.
But this time around,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of the dead. This
Huh.
time around, though, I must have had such a negative expectation that I was like, oh, that doesn't look too bad. I was also watching on my laptop this time around instead of my larger screen TV. So maybe that played a little bit of a role. But one of the things, it's interesting because I like the change, but I also think it pulled me out of the immersiveness of the CG, is Smeagol's face. They make him so evil looking, especially when he's turning Frodo against Sam. And it's really effective, and it's really scary to look at him, but it also looks so different from the way that I had seen him that it almost reminds me, oh yeah, this is a CG character. Because I think they painted on his maniacal looks a little bit too exaggerated.
Well, I definitely think these were the early effects, like we talked about with Planet of the Apes, how they used it later with the face things and everything they've done in Avatar and stuff. I think this is kind of the movie where it kind of started, and I think that's why Gollum's facial reactions look so real, is because I think that a lot of it came from the actual facial reactions of Andy Serkis.
Yeah.
So those men were simply called the Men of the Mountains.
The Men of the Mountains.
And during the Second Age, I'm reading here, they had sworn an oath to align themselves with Isildur, but they also worshipped Sauron. And so when Isildur summoned them for aid, they did not come. And so Isildur cursed them for not fulfilling their oath. And that's what led to their state of existence that they were found in by Aragorn.
Another instance of duty bound.
Yeah.
What you say matters. What you swear to matters.
So here's an interesting, in kind of getting back to what you were talking about with death, Dan, but a little bit of a tangent. I was reading some of the reviews about The Return of the King, and one of the consistent critiques that I had noticed was they had talked about how in a post-Game of Thrones era, that a movie like Return of the King, where the only main character that we actually care about to die is an old man who's probably getting pretty close to it anyways. Some folks thought it was a bit contrived, or some even use the word childish, to have all of the main characters survive their various battles and journeys. So what are both your thoughts on that?
It's actually funny that you mentioned Game of Thrones, because I was finding myself thinking about Game of Thrones a lot during this, because there are a lot of similarities, not so much in the story, but the sets, the way the fights kind of play out, and some of the character development here and there. But by the time I got to the end, I was thinking, wow, this movie really doesn't kill off anybody. I mean, even like Gandalf, even Gandalf's death is basically kind of taken away.
Sure.
Fellowship. I mean, we're supposed to feel really upset about Gandalf's death, but then it just ends up happening that he survives anyway. And that actually, it's funny too, because that's my theory on the ending too. I was reading about the ending of this film, and some people had a theory that at the end of the movie, when Bilbo and the elves and Gandalf are all getting on the boat, and you look out in the water and you see this big sunset, it almost looks like the gates of heaven. And some people kind of thought of it in a way of they were all kind of going to the next step of their life, whether it be death or heaven or whatever. But there was a line from the book where Gandalf says something. I can't quote it exactly, but then Frodo kind of repeats it. They said it sounds very much like they are entering into the world of death. They are crossing over into the world of heaven. Almost like, in a way, Gandalf and Frodo and Bilbo and all these characters kind of die at the end, because Frodo has this point of driving the fact that his purpose was fulfilled. The Shire is safe, but it's not for me. Basically, like, the Shire and the peace is not for me. It's for all of you. I have someplace else where I can get peace.
Yeah, this is where. Yeah, you can go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
Oh no, let's follow this. I'll come back to the deaths. I'm interested in this.
I was just going to say I don't recall as much lore around the Undying Lands because I think a lot of it falls in the book The Silmarillion and some of Tolkien's other books, and I'm really not read on any of those books, but from what I do recall, the Undying Lands were supposed to kind of be paradise of sorts in Tolkien's world, and the only reason the elves leave the way they do is because they're immortal, and so that's the way that unless they're slain, that they can also then transition on to paradise. But if I remember correctly, everybody else gets there, essentially the same way that gets there by dying.
Well, Tolkien, somebody said something in Tolkien wrote after that takes place after Lord of the Rings. It was like a brief, short little story he wrote or whatever. That there's a story that Legolas eventually travels to the Undying Land as well. So they said it kind of, in a way, dismissed the whole theory of heaven. That basically, why would he go there? Because he was, I don't know, but it's just a running theory across the internet.
Yeah. So one thing that is interesting to me, I guess we're kind of speculating at this point, but if elves have to transition there because they're immortal, it kind of rubs me the wrong way then why Elrond is so upset that his daughter is choosing mortal life. Or rather choosing immortal. I'm unclear on whether or not he's sad because she'll live a super long time and then die, or if she just won't be able to go to the Undying Lands with them because of the life of the Eldar is leaving. Because she even says, "No ship can bear me hence," or however she words it. Right. And so I'm wondering if an elf choosing to not go to the Undying Lands is enough for them to never be able to get there. And of course I start thinking of all my assumptions about Christological parallels that I'm sure Tolkien was fleshing out in his imagination as he creates these worlds. But yeah, so back to the Game of Thrones comparison. It is such a I almost said stark reminder, but I didn't want to make the pun. So it was such a crazy moment when Ned Stark, season 1, I'm about to spoil. I don't know if you give those warnings, but season 1, Ned Stark gets beheaded. I had been so trained by media that characters of such importance don't die.
True.
That I was in shock. I thought, okay, first option, dream sequence. Second option, maybe he comes back. Maybe there's some, and he stays dead. And so that was really effective for me. And I liked it as a plot mechanic that basically said it's less about our characters and more about the story that we're trying to tell. Now, I think Game of Thrones, it's ironic that people would say Lord of the Rings was immature because at least they were consistent, because by the end of Game of Thrones, no one was dying. There were characters who were like 100 whites to 1, and they were coming out unscathed. And there were a lot of complaints about plot armor in that movie or in that series. But yeah, so do I dislike it in Lord of the Rings? I don't know. I don't think I need a tragic death all over the place. I think it's effective, and I think you can really give a character that honorable end and memorialize them. But I don't think I need it.
No, I don't think it's needed either. I think that I maybe the only issue that I would really have with it so much is that some of the characters are really put in a lot of these situations that you kind of roll your eyes like, really? You know, they're in this group of a bunch of people and nobody gets a sword in the back or gets their head sliced off or even a ligament sliced off. I mean, but see, a lot of movies are guilty of that. There's a lot of war sequences in movies where the heroes, you know, they don't get hit, they don't get cut, nothing, but yet everybody they know and all their soldiers are all getting hit.
Everyone else is a stormtrooper.
Well, so
well, yeah, or a red
part of
shirt
me-
from Star Trek.
Part of me thinks it's not an immaturity on Tolkien's part, but it's him recognizing that he's writing in the form of epic stories. And in the Greek epics, you had plenty of open battlefields in which your prominent characters weren't killed. And maybe even in a contrived fashion. And so I think maybe it's a modern thing to throw away your heroes a little bit more easily. And there's a good shock value there too, but that's not the end all of character development, is cutting their life short. This is a Lost spoiler to get into it, but one of the deaths that really upset me was John Locke's death in Lost.
Oh yeah.
And they even teased it and then walked him back because I don't know if you guys remember, but he was going to kill himself. He was going to hang himself. And then Ben Linus talks him out of it and then kills him and strangles him. And so that was a tough death for me, and that was pre-Game of Thrones, and so maybe that warmed me up to the idea. But what that did was it forced me to say, okay, Lost is not about your characters, it's about the story as a whole, and it forced me to step back a little bit. So I don't know, I just think they're different styles. Game of Thrones is a little bit nihilistic for my liking, and I think there's a depressing lack of redemption there. And so if that's the trade-off for, you know, characters that don't live through battles, then maybe I don't want it.
Yeah, it's funny too, because in Lost they all die at the end anyway. So, you know.
Gosh, I never finished that. Is that how it ends? I had.
Oh, you never saw the ending?
I had 3 episodes left. I was going to watch it next week.
Well, you want me to tell you why they die? I mean,
you know what? This might become a Lost podcast because there are a few television enterprises that I have spent more time and emotion on than Lost, the television series.
Oh, that last season still, the last 2 seasons still baffle me, especially that season where they were stuck in the 70s.
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Season 5 finale, the white out with the black text. I still maintain that could have been the end of the series as a whole, and I would have accepted that. And so then in season 6, I was like, okay, you're giving us another season. It better be for something. But in my opinion, it was just a prolonging of them saying, yeah, we're not really going to answer any questions that
was the biggest problem with the show. It didn't with a lot of lingering things. I mean, but I'll tell you though, that show though had some of the best season finales on television.
And I think that show broke ground on a lot of storytelling techniques that we love today.
Yeah, they're duplicated.
Maybe Lost doesn't do it with the pacing of modern shows, but they were the ones who kind of showcased a lot of these new storytelling techniques. I mean, anyway, I could talk about Lost.
They started a new trend in TV. I think Game of Thrones kind of took a little bit from Lost in the way it structured its story and how it did things, and was willing to take risks with killing characters off. And that's another thing with Lord of the Rings too. I mean, you know, it didn't need to kill characters off in order to be shocking or epic. It was about the journey to the journey there, not about the characters and what their fates were. It was more about the journey and how it was all going to come to head.
Yeah. So there. This is a complete tangent. Not even a tangent. A completely different thought line. But I wanted to come back to what you had mentioned, Dan, earlier about power and Gandalf. And there were three things that I really liked about the extended version that I think really kind of gave us some really helpful insight into the enemy, or like Sauron, kind of Sauron, like the corporate Sauron. One was the additional lore around the Witch King, and kind of getting to your mention about Gandalf being powerful. One of the things that I loved about the Witch King's character was that moment where he breaks Gandalf's staff. And kind of I like you were saying, how Gandalf's power is clearly displayed in that moment when he breaks Saruman's staff. I think that we really come to terms with the power that Sauron and his minions have when then his staff is broken by the Witch King. And I think that they did a great job with the Witch King in the extended version. We even had that there was a whole scene that was dedicated to talking about how he's Sauron's greatest weapon and most he's kind of like the deadliest of the nine. And I thought that was really, really cool.
I was thinking I would have loved much more information about the Witch King.
There wasn't nearly enough.
And even the prophecy too, because the prophecy that Éowyn fulfills is not really in the movie. It's just something that Tolkien fans know, and obviously it's in the movie in that it comes to fruition. But I would have loved for them to give a little bit more to the evil characters. I mean, Saruman was a pretty good bad guy in that he was complex. But not many of the other evil characters were really all that complex. And I'd have to imagine that it would be more so in the text, maybe not. But then even if they did a modern day, like the live action show that's coming, I have to imagine that these villains are going to be much more complex and pitiable in a sense. I mean, thinking of Thanos as probably the best example of a recent villain with whom half the internet actually thinks is right, you know? There's this deep development of villains where they take the ideology that fuels them is not necessarily the evil in all the cases, but really the means to an end. Or I guess in Sauron's case, it might just be that he's so greedy and corrupt for power. But I still think there'd be a cool venture into exploring the human elements.
Of the villains.
Nine. Well,
it's true.
I agree.
It's true, because for a series that takes so much time with character development for all of our heroes and all the people that they associate with, you're right, Dan. They don't take the time to really flesh out the bad guys, to make us kind of see their side of things, you know, make them kind of, I don't know, make us understand them better. And Thanos, you're right, is a perfect example of it. Thanos, we got to understand everything about him, so it was easy for us to kind of see his point of view. And with this, we can't see point of view at all.
Well, in a weird way, you're able to see the power of the villain and respect it a little bit more, because it's not just this nameless evil power. I mean, Spider-Man Homecoming was probably the best example of a villain in which I thought, gosh, this guy's hardly a villain. He's just, you know, he's just an outcome of his circumstance. Well, I really felt for him. I mean, think about his life and the choices he made along the way to preserve himself and his family. Now, obviously, there was corruption of some moral character there,
right?
And this kind of utilitarian sacrificing what might be considered good. But yeah, this idea that all the Uruk-hai are kind of these spawned creatures without motive. Although when the Aer Lingus flank them, you see this lack of conviction and fear on their faces that humanizes them in a certain way for me this time around, where I thought to myself, I wonder if there's any, existential exploration of the Uruk-hai, or if they're just spawned and following orders their whole life and there's not much to it. But
right. Yeah.
Well, it seems like the orcs' only motivation in this movie is just they want it to be an orc-dominated world. They want man out of existence. That seems to be the only motivation we get, and it's like, okay, that's just kind of run-of-the-mill, generic, by-the-numbers motivation. Yeah, there's just no...
I mean, there's
Gothmog mentions that. Yeah.
There's an interest... Wait, what does?
Gothmog, yeah, he's that one orc that is leading them, where his one eye is so swollen.
During the battle, he says that one big line. Yeah.
The age of men is past.
The time of
the orc has come.
What's interesting to me is that the effect of a race that doesn't need has no scaffolding for procreation in a romantic structure,
no, it's all barbaric.
There's no negotiation socially or otherwise in their society, because they're just pulled from these breeding sacks. And
I don't think we ever saw a female orc either, now that I think about it. Did we ever see a female orc?
Well, so we get in I think it's Two Towers when... Oh no, it's Fellowship, when Saruman is explaining to... It's not the viewer, is it? He's explaining it to some orc.
It might be Grima. No, we hadn't met Grima yet. You're right.
I think he might be explaining it to the Uruk-hai. It's very much a moment where they're just saying it for the sake of the viewer. And he's like the crossbreed between elves, like a corrupted elvish bloodline or something like that.
Yeah. They can. The Uruk-hai were bred to be able to. Well, they're certainly a lot stronger, but they also can fight in the sun, which the orcs can't. Which is why the Sauron's cloud from Mount Doom needed to extend.
Yeah.
But so that was one of, like I said, that was one of the things that I really liked, was the Witch King, and how it showed that Sauron is a powerful foe, that he has a lot of power. The second piece that I really liked was the scene with Aragorn and the Palantir, where he starts to kind of stage the distraction, the diversion, by taunting Sauron with Elendil, and then the ultimate moment where Sauron's defeat was determined when he allowed himself to be distracted, which I think showed that he was not only powerful, but that he was very prideful. Because in all reality, if you think about that battle, there's no way he needed to be watching it. True. They definitely, even the good guys knew that this was kind of their last. Right, exactly. Like he did not need to be overseeing that battle, particularly when he recognized that there was something going on over at Mount Doom. He really, like, from a purely pragmatic standpoint, should not have allowed himself to be distracted. But I think that the turning of his gaze onto Aragorn, I think for him to enjoy or have the pleasure of seeing Aragorn meet his demise, just revealed how very prideful of a villain he is. So I thought that was interesting. The third, and I wanted to get y'all's thoughts on this. The Mouth of Sauron, I really, really liked.
I love it.
Yeah, and I think because the third thing that really highlights so well to me is that Sauron is a villain that is founded on lies.
Very much so.
And that's very much interwoven into his power, is that he he's a lying villain.
Yeah.
And I just felt like I was really thankful that the scriptwriters brought that into the story, because I felt like it's just a really crucial moment for the development of who Sauron is. But yeah, what you all, it seemed like you all liked him too.
I just love the mouth, because I think he's an effective costume design. His visage alone makes me feel really uncomfortable.
Very
and
much
he has
so.
this he has this movement that kind of reminds me of Guillermo del Toro's Pan's Labyrinth, which is one of my other favorite movies.
Yeah.
And the guy that has the eyes in his hands that's moving around in a really shifty ways. He just has this quirkiness to him that makes me uncomfortable when he's like, And so he amuses me but makes me uncomfortable. I think he's a really great ambassador to I mean, that's the kind of company that Sauron keeps.
Dude probably had the most disgusting mouth I've ever seen in my life.
I like where you can see his tongue pressing through his teeth at a couple points.
Well, and just like his lips, like,
does he have lips?
It's kind of like his mouth is like,
they're like cracked. They're split all over the place. It's like, haven't you ever had that split in your lip where you're like, oh boy, that really hurts.
Yeah.
So it's fun to hear you talk about Sauron too, because one of the things I found interesting this time around is where the heck does Sauron get his power from? And I thought, I don't really know anything about this guy.
That's true.
Except, you know, I'm a product of the times. The zeitgeist of Lord of the Rings is everything fell into myth and shadow and a faceless name. And so I looked into it a little bit, and you could probably speak to this more, but apparently he's a Mayan.
Yep, he's a servant. Yep, he's a lesser deity. Yeah.
And so he was part of the powers that constructed the universe, that brought life and creation, and it happened through sound, and he started to play with dissonant tones or something like that.
His master Morgoth did.
Then he supplanted Morgoth, right?
Yeah.
I just want to know more about that.
No, that's about as far as I know. So Morgoth, So in Tolkien's creation story, there's one kind of chief deity named Eru, who is said to have sung creation into existence, and the Valar are kind of the lesser deities that are said to have sung with him. But there was one Valar named Morgoth who decided to introduce his own theme into the song, and it was at dissonance with Eru's theme. And so Eru, being the wise creator that he is, ends up making a third melody that actually takes Morgoth's theme and his original theme and makes it and changes it into an even more beautiful song than it was originally. So kind of ends up using Morgoth's theme for good in the end.
Yeah. What Morgoth meant for evil,
right?
Eru turned for good.
Yeah. So, yeah, and that's kind of getting back to your point, Dan. I think there are definite moments all throughout Tolkien's lore that his faith really comes through. So some get I think approach Lewis's explicitness.
Gosh, but no one gets quite as explicit as C.S. Lewis does.
Yeah, he's about as far as you can go with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, but it's a really neat story, and but I don't remember too much more in regards to the exact relationship between Morgoth and Sauron. I just know Sauron was a Maiar and was a servant of Morgoth's.
One thing I heard about Maiars is that they can't perish, and that even this defeat of Sauron doesn't actually destroy him, but
Mm.
perhaps he's so weak that he'll never take a corporeal form because he infused the ring with part of his life essence or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And
The
so
Gandalf was a Maiar, by the way.
he was.
Really?
Yeah, he was. Not all of the five. He was a part of the Order of Five Wizards, and not all of the five were Maiar. I feel like it might have been that Saruman and Gandalf were.
And Radagast was not.
No. But yeah, there's a lot of cool lore out there. I
See, and that's what I wish there was more of. And
Mhm.
I don't know if it's that visual media has gotten more into understanding source materials and fan bases, or we've gotten better at fleshing out deeper storylines in shorter amounts of time. But I feel like if there's one overall criticism, it's that the lore exists behind the story. So it's very cool still, but it isn't brought to your attention as a viewer only. And that it's just kind of a window into this world that's deep and rich that you just have to, which is why I'm going to start reading it. So
Yeah, a lot of the source material stuff, I think they've learned a lot from that recently too, because look at like Harry Potter started coming out around the same time Lord of the Rings did. And Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter suffered from a lot of the same problems. It didn't necessarily, I mean, it did a decent job of transferring over stuff from the book to the movie, but again, it did a lot of its things where it pick and choose what it wanted to do. It left a lot of big things out, and you know, I don't know why movies do that, because it's the same problem with video game movies when the source material is right in front of you and you feel the need to divert away or pick and choose, and you're omitting a lot of important information. And even if you're not a fan of the stuff, why are you omitting key story plot points just for the benefit of what, you don't want to write them, or you don't think it's going to be entertaining enough?
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think Harry Potter taught me how to appreciate film adaptations for things other than their faithfulness to the original story. But again, I think you're right in that there's an underlying character that we perceive in stories we love, and if that gets betrayed, I mean, Avatar: The Last Airbender movie is a great example of that, where it's more than just the casting in that movie. It's the tone. It's everything. It's just
Everything's just so off.
Yeah, they just don't get it, it seems. And so I don't think I would accuse Lord of the Rings of that, or Harry Potter of that. I think they got it.
Yeah, they got it.
Yeah, you're right. It's just sometimes, like Fenrir, I remember being such an iconic character for me, and then he barely got any screen time, and I was like, wait a second, how's this even gonna work? So yeah, I will be interested, because I don't often read the books after I watch the material. A lot of times I'll try and seek out the books first. One of my buddies does it the opposite way, because he anticipates always enjoying the books more, and so he wants to interface with the film and then the text. But I'll be interested what it's like to read.
Yeah, Harry Potter was one of those things where I didn't really understand why people were so bothered by what they cut, because I mean, the movies, I don't think the movies had a problem with what they kept and what they cut it out. The movies were told in a very coherent way where everything just it flowed right. Nothing felt like it was extremely omitted. I mean, I guess if you read the books and you dissected them, sure, you're going to know what was missing, and in some things you might have liked to have seen transition to the screen. But can anybody really name in Harry Potter in the movies what really suffered from something not being from the book in the movie? I don't think that realistically you can really think of anything that's really hugely hurting it.
I think what they did very well, and that's what served them, is they nailed the music and all the things that the text couldn't do. Some people, I guess, don't like this. I became aware of this recently. I loved the switch into grittier, darker, both, costuming, lighting, score. Everything got matured and got darker as the series went on. And I kind of felt that growing up with the books. I still remember when the political backdrop of the Ministry of Magic and you know, the pure blood movement kind of exploded, and I just, wow, there was just so much there behind everything, and that was so remarkable. And I think the movies did a really good job of the jarring shift from the cadence of the school year into them on the run and stuff like that. So
yeah, the maturity was very well done. You could definitely, from Sorcerer's Stone, you know, to the very end of Deathly Hallows, you can see not only the maturity of the characters throughout, but just the maturity of the story, how the story's told, the themes, the cinematography, everything. Just that series is one of the ones that I really like how it matures with the ages of the actors and the characters very, very well.
Well, and bringing it back to Lord of the Rings, I think I feel a similar thing at the end of Lord of the Rings is we get back to the Shire, but it's not the same Shire. And it's not that the Shire has changed so much as the experiences that the Fellowship has had have just changed them forever. And there's something that's really sad about that, but it's also so true. It's kind of like when you visit a place that you grew up and it's, you know, the size isn't the same and things are different, and you can relish in the memories that you had there, but there's this, the place is in and of itself a constant reminder that you're not there anymore in the way that you were when you remember it. And so it's this ebbing of time that happens, and I think Lord of the Rings really nails that feeling. You know, Sam is probably the closest to getting back to his roots and building a family, but everyone else is kind of, you know,
they feel out of place.
They're just moving forward and they can't help it.
The Shire didn't feel as happy and giddy as it did in Fellowship. It did feel really different. There was just something that was just, even like when they were in the bar waiting for their drinks, it just didn't seem like that cheery, happy-go-lucky, bright place that it did. It felt really different.
Innocence to experience.
They've seen a lot in the world, a lot of dark, so it makes a big difference now. So okay, so
10.
Here's no, I wasn't gonna go that far yet. I wasn't gonna go there yet. Now, I wanted to ask this question because with Aragorn, you know, with Arwen and Arwen,
Arwen,
you know, I felt for her, especially when he kind of told her off. But now, if you were in Aragorn's shoes, which woman would you choose and why? What would be that quality that you would endure you to pick that one? Gave you a little bit of thinker, huh?
Well, so I just keep thinking of why would he drink from Éowyn's cup? That clearly meant something to her, and I just didn't understand.
the globby soup.
Well, just the whole thing, like she gives him the thing and he drinks it and then she's all happy about it and Theoden congratulates her and I'm like, okay, I'm outside looking in, but there's definitely a cultural implication here that I don't understand. I don't know, kind of like if you unwittingly gave someone a promise ring and you were like, here you go, and they're like, oh, I'm so happy about all this, and you're like, well, doesn't mean anything to me.
Give me that back.
And so I'm still confused at that because I don't understand Aragorn's behavior, if that means anything or if that's just a weird scene. I don't know if you have any book reference for that.
Yeah, I do. I think that the hinting at romance between Aragorn and Éowyn in the movies is contrived for the sake of the audience of the movies. In the book, Arwen never wrestles with the real temptation to go to the Undying Lands and to leave Aragorn.
Oh, really?
No, actually, and what's
that's like her entire arc in the movies.
I know.
Wow.
And what's interesting is that actually Elendil is not what gets sent to him in the books. The sort of Elendil that Elrond shows up with in the movie, it's actually a banner that Arwen makes for him, just to remind him that she's still ultimately rooting for him, that she's there and is hopeful for him. So I think that I think it'd be hard for me to get I think out of that context to imagine Arwen a different way. I really would have to go with Arwen, because I think that's I just think that the commitment that's very obvious in their relationship throughout the books is really strong.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say though, I think Arwen is a rather weak character.
Sure.
And I think I'd go the same way, because obviously there's a history off screen there, and they're essentially betrothed. I mean, or married. Who even knows what the situation is there? But
and the same age versus Eowyn being 20.
Yeah, there you go. It's only 60 years.
Yeah, it's like he likes he goes for the ones that are a little younger than him. That's all.
Pretty Ricky says it's just a number, something like that.
Yeah, it's just a number. Age is what you feel.
Arwen is a passive character for me. I think she shines the brightest in Fellowship. I really loved her repartee with Aragorn. I like that she's stealthier than he is in some circumstances. I like that she's a better horse rider than he is. I like that she's able to conjure the magic of her people to both fend off the ring wraiths and save Frodo. But then we really don't see anything of her except for these weird dream visions where she's like smooching and hugging on Aragorn. And so, she's a passive character. She doesn't play as active a part as I would have liked, because the whole Eldar thing, I think she makes a really profound sacrifice. As far as I understand it, and I love magic and mystical elements in fantasy, and I think, I don't know, I just feel like she kind of got nerfed. But maybe in the books, if she's just sending banners, she's kind of passive in that regard too. I don't mean to be.
Here's some cloth.
Mean. Yeah, here, go do this. Shoot.
But yeah, I really like what they were able to do with Eowyn, having only been in 2 of the movies. I think she shows, I don't know, just a really cool, strong character who wants to help people. I think there is a stubbornness that she grows. I don't know. I just like Eowyn. She's more thought-provoking to me.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I probably, if it were me, if I was Aragorn, I probably would have picked Arwen, because she's a fighter much like he is. And like you said, look at the way she rides a horse. Look at the way she's compelled to go into battle and fight for the cause and this and that. And you're right with Arwen, Dan, because the way the movie showcases her, she doesn't really do anything. She doesn't really do anything. I mean, we get she has a history with Aragorn, and I respect that. And I would have actually liked to have seen more of that history. Therefore, at the end, when she shows up and she's going to basically become the queen, I can kind of feel that. That was the one scene at the end that kind of bothered me, because, when he sees her, we're supposed to feel like, oh my God, it's his love and he's got her back. But as the audience, I'm kind of like, I didn't really see any of your relationship. It's like if a TV show puts 2 characters together and they don't develop them, and it's like, okay, so now I'm supposed to care.
Yeah, like unearned moments.
Yeah, it's just what it felt like. And for a movie that, like I said before, that's so character development and character moment heavy, that relationship is very underdeveloped.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, where it makes sense given the lore, but they just didn't get enough screen time.
Yeah.
But Yeah,
right.
and again, Witch King, elves, I could have done with a lot more magic. And I think I said this in the last podcast, is one of the things I'd like to see is more explicit magic use. Get into that. Like, what is the Council of Five? Who's in the order? What's the order's aim? I think the political structures and the lore, the prophecies, magic use outside of the kingdom of humans, the kingdom of men, there's a lot of room for development. And maybe the live action show is going to have the time to dedicate to those other kingdoms and storylines. I'm hopeful that it's rich with Tolkien lore.
Me too.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing we can benefit from with this TV show. A lot more depth to maybe certain things we didn't get enough of in these because there wasn't maybe enough time to do so. Yeah. All right. Well, since we've reached
10.
the end, as we've reached the end of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I will ask 2 questions: favorite moment of the entire trilogy and worst moment of the entire trilogy.
You go first, Al.
Favorite moment of the entire trilogy was when Sam was looking at.
How did I know it doesn't involve Sam?
was looking into Frodo's eyes, and you could see as Frodo gotten on the ship to go to the Undying Lands, and you could
That's
see
your favorite moment,
and you could see their friendship. Least favorite.
Wait a minute. We go through about
least favorite.
Is that
moment.
real? Is that a joke?
Least favorite moment.
Wait a minute. This entire trilogy is nearly 10 hours long, and that's your favorite moment?
Hear me out. Least favorite moment when Frodo was looking into Sam's eyes when he was about to go into the Undying Lands. No, I'm just kidding.
I was gonna say that
was gonna take the cake right there. That was gonna take the cake.
Favorite moment ever. Gosh, that's a heavy question. You should have told me beforehand that you were gonna ask this one.
Funny.
What are your real moments, Al? Because I need more time.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Well,
so you've thought about this, Mike. You lead us with this.
Yeah.
What are your favorite and least favorite?
That is tough. I mean, I have a few, but if I had to really pick out like the favorite moment, I probably would have to go with the scenes in the Fellowship in the Shire. Just basically that whole beginning in the Shire, because I like getting to know the hobbits and I like seeing their culture and how they live and how they're all friendly to each other and the houses they live in, the parties they have, the food they eat. Yeah, I would just think that probably the Shire. And I think that's the one thing that upset me, that after that we don't see it till the very end, because it's what got me to get involved to liking Lord of the Rings, because the movie opens with this and it's so lighthearted, the music is so cheery, and it really starts us down this really dark, steep road that we go to that never brightens up until really the very end.
Yeah.
I'll circle back with my least favorite one.
I guess it's probably one of 2 scenes for me. One is when Sam picks up Frodo and says, "I can carry you." I don't know what it is, but I've always loved that scene, and
that's a good moment.
I always get teary-eyed when he does it. The second scene that's probably one of my favorites is when Gandalf and the Rohirrim charge down and liberate everybody in Helm's Deep. My least favorite, I know, I think of it every so often. I will never ever like this line. It's when Frodo is in Shelob's lair, and he touches the wall, and he says, "It's sticky." I absolutely hate
my
that
God.
line. That will always
That's
be my
so
least
funny.
favorite.
It's sticky.
Of the entire trilogy.
Wow.
So I think my favorite. I'm not prepared. I think it's yeah. If I think about I'm just gonna go with one of two scenes. I'm gonna narrow it down to two, and it's not because I love them or anything. They're just the scenes that come to mind the most when I'm not watching the movies, and that is the old man fight between Sauron and Gandalf.
That is pretty
Sauron
badass.
and Gandalf.
That is pretty
And
badass.
I always remember it as just kind of like squeaks and groans because the tile floor. But I love Gandalf's, denial of Saruman when he says, "Tell me, friend, when did Saruman the Wise abandon reason for madness?" So maybe that scene, or the scene when the orcs want to eat the halflings, and they're kind of arguing amongst themselves. The guy that's like, "What about their legs?"
They don't need those.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think that's a quotable scene when he's like, "Meat's back on the menu tonight, boy." And the infighting. Yeah, it's very henchman-y. I like the quirky, dark way the orcs interact. So, or any Gandalf line almost ever in the entire movie.
It's true.
He says, "Shadowfax, show me the meaning of haste. Show us the meaning of haste."
I was thinking with how much you talked about Duty Bound that you were going to say when Sam says, I made a promise, Mr. Frodo.
And I don't mean to. So now that we're getting to that, let's get to our least favorite part in the trilogy.
Yeah. I got two now. I'm loaded now.
I would have said when Sam walks out into the water and almost drowns. Because I get it. I like it. But as far as movie making goes, him walking out into the water, them kicking in the slow motion, and he slow
that dreaded slow motion
looks up, and then a hand comes down and grabs him after who knows how long and pulls him into the boat. Sam is easily 1.5 to 2 Frodos. I don't know. It just seems like one of those. I get the point, but it's so over dramatized that it's almost like a parody of itself.
In a way, yeah. I don't disagree at all. That's actually about right.
That's definitely my least favorite part. Is I get what it's doing. I like what it's doing, and you're right, Al. It ties into my favorite theme, but it didn't hit the screen well for me. You are going alone, and I'm coming with you. I don't know.
I'm gonna go with two. My two least favorite thing. Number one, I really disliked those scenes with Merry and Pippin with the trees and Two Towers.
Oh, really?
I wanted to fall asleep. I started dozing during those scenes. I wanted to skip over them. I was just kind of like they went on way too long.
Well, even the Ents seemed like they were falling asleep.
Yeah, I can see why. They talk and you want to fall asleep. That
hurts my feelings.
And then going back to what we said before, just the whole relationship between Aragorn and Arwen, it doesn't work. It doesn't work, and I think it really kind of affects the end of Return of the King because I don't feel that relationship. I don't feel that connection, and I think it kind of hurts that end of it. But, whatever.
Yeah, to each their own.
Mm-hmm. Okay, 2 more questions.
10.
This question. Now, I'm almost there. Favorite and least character of the trilogy.
Favorite and least favorite?
Gandalf is my favorite.
Mhm. Well, I know Gandalf's your favorite. That's, you know. I have two, but go ahead, Alistair. I'll let you go first.
Well, Sean Astin is definitely my favorite.
So
No, no. That's an actor.
Yeah, you got to say character, not
Sam.
actor.
Samwise Gamgee.
Samwise the Brave.
Least favorite? Let me think about it. You can go ahead.
You're gonna say Frodo.
Don't
no,
you?
it's not
Don't
Elijah.
you condemn Elijah Wood?
It's not Elijah.
I think my least favorite. Well, I don't know, Mike. You do your favorite. I gotta think.
You know, I have two, but a third one's kind of rising up. So Gandalf definitely is one. Sam, and I'm about to go with Pippin. That Return of the King. Pippin really became one of my favorite characters.
Nice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think my least favorite, partially, and this isn't his. I'm sure not his fault. This was a cinematography decision.
Mm-hmm.
My least favorite is the ring wraith. That when he gets the torch thrown into his face, and on Amon-Hen flails around, and literally his body does like a 180 as he's flaying. That's my least favorite.
Well, you
So
swung for the fence there.
Yeah, that's very specific.
Yeah.
My least favorite is not because it's a bad character. It's actually because it's such a well done character, and it's Denethor.
John Noble is fantastic.
I hate his guts. He's such a jerk.
He's an
and
asshole.
Yeah,
You wish Boromir had died, or had lived, and I had died instead.
Yes.
Yes, I wish that.
Yeah, and it's effective. I hate him.
What a father. What a father.
Yeah, I really dislike, and the way eating was such a good choice of just him being a sloppy little pig while he demands that Pippin sings for him.
I like that. Hey,
that
Hobbit.
is so effective for me. Yeah.
Hey, Hobbit, do you sing? Sing for me. Here, sing.
Yeah. Really well done. And so I really disliked him.
Yeah, I can agree with that. He's scum. My least, I'm gonna go back again. Arwen's my least favorite character.
Oh, I can't. There's too much
Liv Tyler
potential there.
I like Liv Tyler as an actress, but I think she's wasted in this movie.
What else has she been in? I've never seen her in anything else.
So she was Bruce Banner's love interest in
really?
In The Incredible Hulk.
Why haven't we
Edward
seen
Norton
her
one.
since then, by the way?
Well, because they kind of all but severed with that movie's canon. I mean,
except for General Ross.
Yeah, and so I think they wanted to play up the Hulk and Scarlet angle, and I think they were worried about bringing in some of the cast and not all of them. I think they'd probably just rather forget that Hulk was ever. Well, so the other aspect of it too, I think, is a rights issue because Hulk, they can't have a Hulk movie. They had to have Hulk as a third-party character, I think, was the rule for how they could develop movies with him.
I think Universal still owns the rights.
Yeah, and I don't remember, or I don't know, rather, if that affects how they could license the different characters from there. Maybe they just figured it wasn't worth the paycheck that they'd have to dish out for, I don't know why I'm blanking on her name.
Well, they did dish out a hell of a payday to Sony in order to share those rights with Sony with Spider-Man because that's a whole mess in its own, and that almost fell apart. Just what was it last year? Saying Sony was going to take them back. That was a mess.
Yeah. So what else is she in? I think a lot of the movies I've seen her in, she's too whispery and weak. Incredible Hulk is a great example where I just don't think she's a strong character. Lord of the Rings is one of my more favorite showings of her. She's in Armageddon. She does really, really well in the HBO series The Leftovers. I highly recommend that show, and I also think she does really well in it.
Watch.
But yeah,
Leftovers.
Interesting. All right, so the last question is
9.
Okay, favorite film of the trilogy and what your rating is of Return of the King.
I got to be honest, Return of the King almost supplanted Fellowship. Maybe it's because I didn't sit down and watch it in one sitting this time around, so I didn't get fatigued. But it just was so good. I think I gave Fellowship an 11 and Two Towers a 10. So I guess I'll give Return of the King 10.7, 10.8.
Ooh, really close.
So I will say this. I think Return of the King is better than Two Towers in almost every way.
Yeah. Most definitely.
I really like the revealing of reincarnated Gandalf, and I like the way he interacts with Theoden. And I like Theoden better in Two Towers. He kind of just, I mean, he has this rebellious streak in Two Towers, and then in Return of the King, he's kind of just like, yeah, whatever you say, Aragorn. And Aragorn's like, we got to leave soon. We don't have much time. And he like, yep. So, yeah, I like it. So Fellowship number 1, Return of the King number 2, but it's very close. And then Two Towers number 3.
Okay. Al?
Yeah, I think my favorite, I'm a sucker for some of the battle sequences in Return of the King that I really enjoy. So probably Return of the King as my favorite. And I will give it a 10.
Oh,
you gave him all 10s, right?
Yeah. At least we got a favorite out of him because the number scale won't do it.
Al's favorite movie of the trilogy is the books.
Yes, that's my favorite.
That makes sense.
Yes.
Or no, Al, it's okay. Your favorite's the Hobbit trilogy. It's okay.
My favorite is the cartoon version of The Hobbit.
Ooh, that is a good one, but they took out the Beastmaster guy. Well, there's more than one cartoon version, but the one we watched in Mr. Meyer's class, I was really upset that they took out the giant.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know why. I wanted him to be in it so bad, but
let's see. My favorite, it's gonna have to go to Return of the King. For Return of the King being the longest, I felt like it had the best pacing. It seemed like it moved. It seemed like it moved pretty quickly. It didn't feel like its runtime to me. I just felt like there was a lot going on, and the movie just kept pushing things at you. There really wasn't many slow moments. I mean, it's very close to Fellowship for me. I mean, 'cause those moments in the Shire and Fellowship are so dear to me. So, I mean, those two are very close together. Two Towers is easily the weakest for me. That was easy to separate because just the first half of Two Towers to me is just kind of, it's just, I felt it was slow. I kind of wanted to doze out to the beginning of Two Towers. Maybe it's because of those, Pippin and tree scenes and all that stuff. But so yeah, I'd say Return of the King, Fellowship really close behind it, and then Two Towers at number 3.
It's funny you mentioned you like the pacing, Mike, because I think that was one of the I think the way that they interwove the storyline of what was going on in the West and then Frodo and Sam was pretty different from the books. In the books, they kind of have those two lines as one consistent story. Like you see a lot of Frodo and Sam in the Two Towers, and very little of the West. And then the Return of the King was supposed to kind of catch you up to speed on everything that had happened for everyone else. But for the sake of the pacing, they kind of ended up handling that differently in the film trilogy. They kind of
I like that choice. One of my friends was talking about Game of Thrones and making the distinction between chronological storyline telling and thematic storyline telling, especially with something like an episodic story where are you seeing what's happening to the characters because the themes are linked, or are you seeing it because of when it's happening? And I think they did a pretty good job in Lord of the Rings of kind of making parallels between both. That, of course, it was chronological, but I think they paired the scenes nicely and cut from and to them in ways that made thematic sense too, overall.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, that concludes the retrospective on Lord of the Rings. This has been a lot of fun, guys. This is
agreed.
I was long overdue to do that.
We had 50 bonus minutes in this podcast.
Yeah, we do. Check out the extended versions today. Buy 'em.
Yeah, seriously.
But coming up, we all discussed the Star Wars saga.
Yes.
We decided. Go ahead.
I was going to say we have another guest that may be joining us to help Mikey defend the prequel trilogy. A guest by the name of Jeremy Larson, who I hope is listening.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you think Jeremy will join?
Oh, he's already committed.
Oh yeah.
Oh, nice.
He and I are gonna have fun with that. We're gonna have fun.
I better recruit some people to to fight against
17-person podcast.
I can fend off some, but not everybody.
I don't think you'll find as big an enemy in the prequels as you think in me, Al.
Ooh, Al, you might be in trouble.
Well, so what's funny is I bought the prequel trilogy, and I think I've watched it 3 times this year for some reason, because I've been trying to get my sister into Star Wars, and so I did. I think I was trying to convince her into the Machete Order, which is 4, 5. Well, Machete Order with Phantom, which is 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 6, and then push it through. But she was like, "Let's just do Release Order," and I was like, "Okay, that's fine." But so I watched them with her. I watched them with Mariah, and then I was in this mode where I was like, "I want to see them all in order," and so I watched them on my own, and it's one of those things where the story behind it is better than the execution. And so I like the story, but not necessarily how it's done. But yeah, I'm excited for that. I'll be excited for that podcast.
It's going to be fun because we're going to do kind of a special structure with that. You know, we're going to do 3 episodes, and then each episode will just cover the prequel, original, and sequel trilogy. So we'll get to break down the trilogies as their own thing. And then I think by the time we get to the end of the sequel trilogy one, we'll be able to kind of to dissect the whole saga as a whole and how they all kind of come together and if they tell the story cohesively or whatever. So I'm looking forward to that because I got a lot of Star Wars knowledge. So
yeah,
I'm gonna nitpick the crap out of that trilogy.
Oh, it's on! Let's go! You're not gonna get me to say much negative about especially about the prequels. I mean, I'll be fair on some things, but
yeah.
I'll bite my tongue. I can't. I just can't. Cool. I'm looking forward to that. That's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining me on the Lord of the Rings, and look forward to seeing you guys on the Star Wars ones.
Sounds good. Thanks again, Mike.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night, everybody.
There is still hope. I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All you have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to you.
Seas and mountains fall, and we come end of days. In the dark I hear her call, calling me there.
For Frodo.
I will go there and back again.
Even the smallest person can change the